If I was to ask you to list some things that could potentially represent an unreasonable risk to life, what would pop into your head? An unsecured and loaded gun, perhaps? An automobile being driven by someone under the influence of drink or drugs, maybe? An attack dog that has slipped its muzzle, making jokes about John Barilaro? No? How about a DJI Avata? Did you know that Australia was the first country in the world to regulate the use of unmanned aerial vehicles? Way back in 2002, the federal law officially titled Part 101 Unmanned Aircraft and Rocket Operations was inserted into the existing Civil Aviation Safety Regulations legislation of 1998. I know that Australia likes to pretend to the world that it's a nation whose citizens treat the rule of law as instruments constructed from flexible materials that can be bent in any way that suits. Honestly, the opposite is true. I've lived here for a couple of decades now, and believe me when I tell you I wouldn't live anywhere else, but sweet Jesus, does this country love its rules and regulations. The regulations that govern the use of consumer drones here in Oz mean that most of the real world capabilities of pretty much any drone on the market are totally redundant. Technically speaking, a Mavic 3 can fly 15 kilometers away, but if you follow the letter of the law, your maximum range is at best about 200 poxy meters. Theoretically, it could be a bit further than 200 meters if you have good eyesight, unlike me, since you're supposed to be able to see in which direction your drone's pointed with your naked eyes. You're not legally allowed to fly beyond visual line of sight without an expensive remote pilot's license, and most people who fly drones for shits and giggles aren't going to bother with some excruciatingly overcomplicated course that costs upwards of $3,500. Technically speaking, pretty much any modern consumer drone can fly several kilometers high. Even the Mini 3 Pro with its titchy little battery can theoretically fly 4 fucking kilometers straight up. And how high are you legally allowed to go? 120 meters. I accept that we probably shouldn't be putting drones in the same airspace as passenger air traffic, but let's be realistic about these things. Light aircraft typically fly between 2,000 and 10,000 feet above ground level. Commercial jets fly 40,000 feet up. And even a nautical mile out from an airport, an aeroplane on landing approach is still more than 350 feet up. That 120 meter restriction for drones seems ludicrously overzealous. You can't fly at night, you can't fly in fog, you can't fly over buildings, you can't fly over people, you can't fly over whales, you can't fly in national parks. If people buying their first drone in JB Hi-Fi actually read the list of things you can't do with one, they'd probably just get a rechargeable massager instead and pretend they were going to use it for a niggling shoulder injury. The rules and regulations are only getting tighter and more restrictive. It can surely only be a matter of time before the government implements a drone buyback program to reduce the number of death-dealing drones in circulation. One section of the official regulations pertains to so-called populous areas. In the Part 101 Civil Aviation Safety Regulations, it defines a populous area like this: an area in relation to the operation of an unmanned aircraft that has a sufficient density of population for some aspect of the operation or some event that might happen during the operation, in particular a fault in or failure of the unmanned aircraft to pose an unreasonable risk to the life, safety or property of somebody who is in the area but is not connected with the operation. Now, it should be obvious to anyone that this part of the legislation is simultaneously all-encompassing and deliberately vague. Those three variables, life, safety and property, can easily be applied to literally any situation. Of course, it's the whole unreasonable risk to life bit that is the reason you're not legally allowed to fly your drone directly over people. The argument is a drone, unlike a light aeroplane or even a helicopter, does not have any glide capabilities. If a drone shits itself in mid-air, it drops out of the sky and falls directly to Earth a point below its location of failure. And if a drone shits itself above a populous area, i.e. somewhere with at least one human being in it, then that apparently poses an unreasonable risk to life and safety. In 2019, scientists at the Injury Biomechanics Research Center at Ohio State University released a paper titled Human Response and Injury Resulting from Head Impacts with Unmanned Aircraft Systems. Their test drones, which included an Inspire 2 and a Mavic Pro, showed that drones could cause skull fractures if you persistently flew them into people's heads. The fact that the injuries in the study only occurred in one of the 35 laboratory test impacts is not really relevant, because the powers that be in this country would simply argue that any risk that can be mitigated should be. The fact that no sub-250 gram drones were included in the study also makes its findings less relevant in the modern drone era. That being said, I am prepared to accept that it's not a great idea to fly a big-ass drone directly above people. And I think most people that fly drones understand and accept that too. But everything else, that's just bollocks, isn't it? I refuse to believe that a Mini 3 Pro poses any risk whatsoever to a building it might fall onto. I reckon you'd have to dial it all the way up to a DJI Matrice before you could do the sort of damage that demands government regulations. But even if a Mini 3 Pro did fall out of the sky and lightly scuff the roof tiles of a building, are you seriously suggesting that therefore all drone flights over buildings should be banned? That's one of the main problems with the current Australian regulations for consumer drones. The regulations do not reflect the fact that consumer drones have been getting smaller, lighter and safer for years. Small drones have been the best-selling variant for years. The Mavic Mini, Mini 2 and Mini 3 top DJI sales list by some margin. All of the legitimate research into drones is based on historical models like the old Phantom 3s, and that research does not reflect the type of drones being flown in 2022. The legislation does not reflect the quality of current drones and the vastly improved safety systems. With multiple sensors and advanced collision detection firmware, it's quite difficult to embed a Mini 3 Pro in someone's bonce, even in a laboratory-controlled environment. And how often do drones, such as those in DJI's current range, fail in mid-air? What's the percentage of catastrophic failures versus successful flights? I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest a minuscule proportion of modern drones fall out of the sky, let alone how many do so in close proximity to human beings. I've searched far and wide and I can't find a single instance of a drone falling out of the sky and landing on someone's head in a public environment. In fact, the only news story I can find relating to drones impacting with people was at a triathlon race in Perth in 2014, and in that case, it turned out the drone didn't even hit the athlete, it landed behind her and spooked her. Interestingly, the vast majority of the other drone-related mishaps, such as collisions with high-voltage power lines, pertain to commercially flown drones being operated by so-called experts. So, where am I going with this line of argument? Well, simply put, The current drone legislation in this country is ridiculously restrictive. Why are we banned from flying beyond visual line of sight, even in areas where there are zero humans, such as over the ocean? Why are we restricted to a flight ceiling of 120 meters, even in areas where there is no passenger flight traffic or restricted airspace? Why can't we fly at night? It's perfectly legal in the US, UK, Canada, France, Germany, Spain, Singapore, China, Indonesia, and on and on. It's not legal in Australia or New Zealand. Why is this? Why are FPV drones banned here? In pretty much every other country on the planet, you can fly FPV in public areas as long as you have a spotter. Why is this? Why are we banned from getting within 100 meters of marine mammals? If it's to protect the whales, then why are certain well-known drone filmmakers allowed to do it with impunity? And why do other countries with their own scientific advisory bodies have no issue with drones being flown near or even above marine mammals? I'm sorry, but it's premium grade nanny state bullshit. Australian drone owners are being treated like little children who are apparently incapable of applying common sense to their drone use. The public have been whipped up into a frenzied state of fear and hatred of drones by the media, who trigger half-crazed posts about spying by the kind of Karens who inhabit community Facebook groups. When a country like China has more relaxed drone regulations than Australia, you really have to question the level of control the authorities are exerting on its citizens with their silent approval. Alright guys, that'll do it for this video. Do you think Australia's drone regulations are overreach? Why do you suppose pretty much every other country on the planet treats its drone owners as responsible adults and not untrustworthy children? Let me know in the comments section below. If you like the video, please give us a like and subscribe to my channel for more photography and drone related content like this. Till the next time guys, ta-ta.